Let me go live.
Are we ready, Dave?
We are live.
Sort of feel like a Secret Service agent up here that's singing in my ear. Anyway, our program today will be brought by one of our very own, Ryan McReynolds, who is Assistant City Manager for Operations, which gives Ronnie Hammonds a full-time job trying to make him look good. So, Ronnie, you're doing a great job, buddy. Glad you're there. Ryan may have been born in Binghamton, New York. But by the grace of God, his family moved to Knoxville. And he was raised in Knoxville, in Farragut, graduated from Farragut High School. From there, he went on to Cookeville, Tennessee, and attended Tennessee Tech, where he graduated with his degree in civil engineering. Later obtained an MBA from East Tennessee State University. Ryan worked with the city of Johnson City from 1994 to 2001, but he left the dark side. He then went into the private sector, but then quickly realized his retirement wouldn't be as good if he stayed in the private sector, so he went back to the public sector. Came to Kingsport in 2004. He wanted that cushy retirement. He's married to Mary Robin Caldwell Chadwell. Caldwell, I thought I had that right. Good old First Baptist Church girl. And that's how Ryan wound up in Kingsport. They have 4 children, from 3rd grade to a senior in high school. Please welcome Ryan McReynolds.
Okay, well, I put this on. Dave, do you want to explain, I guess, where this is being streamed?
This is being streamed on Facebook Live, and it will be recorded and then moved over to YouTube. We have like 3 different sessions we're going to do. The last one is the mayoral, mayoral? Yeah, and that'll be streamed also. So we'll see how this all works, folks.
I agreed to this, but I didn't realize the earpiece would be in 3 different ears before it got into my ear. I guess when we do the mayoral, we'll just pass it up and down.
No. We'll have a microphone, different setup.
It's not an actual earpiece, it's just laying on my ear. So, before we begin, I forgot, Ted, what did you call the financial institute?
First Church of Finance.
The First Church, and then now what will it be? The First Church?
First Church of Civic Responsibility.
Civic Responsibility. We still actually will have a finance department, so it will be all of it. And Civic Responsibility, I do want to introduce again, even though he's visiting, has been introduced, but I would love for everyone to reach out and get to know Mike Housewright. Mike is a guest of John Campbell. Do you mind waving, Mike? Yeah. He is town administrator of Mount Carmel. So we are neighbors of each other. We work together in many different aspects. And he is not as blessed as Kingsport to have as large of a staff, so he really has to take care of everything. Some people might think working for the larger cities is a tougher job, but quite honestly, working for those towns the size of Mount Carmel and Churchill can be a very trying job as well. So do get to know Mike, a great guy, and really trying to provide a lot of professionalism within the cities around us. I think you came from Unicoi, is that right? Yep. So anyway, as you notice, I think in the program it was called Regions Bank Facilities, or the move, and we'll get to that. That's kind of been the tail end of the full project. The front end of it was a facilities study, and it was actually phase 1 of the facilities study. And one of the things in city government that we've got to continue to push ourselves on are we providing services, are we doing everything in the best fashion for the citizens as we can do? Because you can become complacent, quite honestly, because if it worked last year, the year before, nobody complains. And it's quite easy just to keep doing what you've always done. The harder thing is to say, is there a different way to provide the service at or at a better service at and a lower price? So we're always pushing on this. This is something that Jeff definitely pushes on. Our BMA has always pushed on. And John really pushed on when he came into the city as well as a city manager. I saw it in Johnson City when I worked within his organization as well. But that was kind of the genesis of this whole program, was to say, okay, the way we do business, if you don't think about that, you'll just continue to do business. You'll continue to replace roofs on large buildings that house 4 people. You'll continue to replace HVAC systems at very high dollars for 4 or 5 people, because you just were scattered. And the reason we're scattered is because those were just the opportunities to backfill groups into spaces, because we might have outgrew City Hall. So what we did, and I've seen this very successfully done in other areas, most recently in the city of Knoxville, but was to let a group come in, look at our facilities, and say, you know, is there a better way to do this? Number one was the administrative groups, and basically those are all the groups that really can report up through Jeff and administrative functions, not the service groups. We're not talking about parking garbage trucks on Church Circle. That really wouldn't work out. Someone mentioned Ronnie, and he is part of that service organization. I had someone call me today, and they mentioned, asked me to see if Ronnie could do something. They said, you know, he's amazing that it's not just that he puts it on his to-do list. He gets whatever you ask, anything to inquire of, done that day. And that's kind of the mantra that he has pushed out in that group. But that's a service group. That's phase 2. We're now looking at those and really have no plans to do anything, but to see is there opportunities within our services group to either consolidate or anything like that. But the Regions Bank kind of came about in the middle of that whole process. So we were looking at all the administrative functions and saying, is there a better way to do this? Let's see. Okay. And when we did this presentation, you know, there is a big difference between the private and public sector. The biggest difference is everything we do is out there for the consumption of everyone. In the private sector, you can make a lot of different deals and different things, and nobody knows it. So when I first presented this back in the fall, the very next day, I think the headline, I'm not quite sure exactly what it wrote, what it said, but it referenced Regions Bank in the city. Well, their employees weren't necessarily privy to that, and it sounded like we were buying the bank and it was going away. And so that is definitely not the situation. So Regions had asked when I do this presentation to our board the second time, and any time I do it, to make a statement that Regions Bank is committed to the city of Kingsport. In fact, they're committed to the downtown area. If you've been in that bank branch lately, you will see that the building is a whole lot more than what their functional needs are. Their functional needs are very similar to the other downtown banks, and that is a much larger building. So they're currently looking for a spot in the downtown area that they can continue to serve the citizens of Kingsport with the services that they are providing. So I put that in there because we're not actually buying the bank itself. We're just looking at 415 Broad Street. It provided, I think, a lot of their customers a lot of concern. But the reason we did this, what we looked at is why, what, how, and when. Once we kind of got through the facility study and Regions, I think they reached out to Jeff to begin with. And they said, well, have y'all considered our building as a potential city operation, as a purchase? And so he kind of put the two together. But we'll walk through the why we would be looking at this, the what are we talking about, the how, and then the when. But before I begin, I'm going to pass this over to Jeff, because this is what we do in our presentations, because I don't know the backstory of this. Do you mind giving a little?
So the picture that you're seeing right there, I'll do this. The picture that you're seeing right there is the what's called the Civic Center. That was supposed to be built between the library and what is now Home Trust Bank. It's just a parking lot. It was never built. It was never connected. So if you can envision, directly across the street at 415 Broad is where the Regions Bank currently is, but it was the Kingsport Inn. And so the Kingsport Inn bookended with that building that you're seeing right there. You can imagine what a wonderful location that would have been on Church Circle, but that plan never happened. So ironically, we're kind of coming right back to the original plan, although it's just across the street.
I think I provided David a heart attack on that. And I did forget my notes, but I've got a lot of backup here. Matthew has seen this presentation 2 or 3 times, so he can give it if I forget anything, and Jeff has definitely seen it. But the components that we looked at once this kind of started forming was, number one, and this was not even on our radar to begin with, was the courtrooms. And when I say that, that really is the foundation once we have worked our way through this. And I think we'll see that in a second, and our attorneys in the room can testify to it. But the courtroom, we should have been pushing this whole process out just solely about the courtrooms themselves, providing an opportunity for the citizens, the attorneys, the judges to do business, the legal transactions and everything that need to occur in a safe and modern environment, not what we provide them in City Hall. But the customer interaction, this kind of came out through the whole study as well. It wasn't on the front end. What I was looking at was more of the consolidation, the dollars. Is there a way to do the same thing that we're doing at a lower cost? But quite honestly, courtrooms could be primary and move this whole process. Customers was one, and I'll describe it a little further. How we treat our citizens is another huge building block to this process. And then the collaboration we'll talk about, and then the consolidation, which was really what I began looking at. And the courtrooms, the city, has anyone been in the City Hall courtroom? No, Andy has. And has anyone been in there and actually done court activities? Jack? It is probably, and I'll say it's probably 40 years out of date. And definitely post 9/11, just really out of date. If you go around to many of the courtrooms throughout our area, I'm not quite sure many would be at this level or below. It is not the optimum situation. And that's just to do court. Now, when you start building upon that, what are called life safety issues, how do you get a big group out of that building if something was to occur? Those type things start layering upon each other, and you're starting to think, we've got to do something. And the attorneys and judges have said this for years, that we have got to do something. Post 9/11, it put it on the kind of the radar, and in 2009, there was a study done of how do we deal with this courtroom situation. What we're talking about is we've got a much better situation inside the Justice Center. The Justice Center, you walk through a secured environment, and then every activity that's occurring there is within the secured environment. So you've got 2 courtrooms, actually 3 with the juvenile, but everything is well maintained as far as who needs to be in different locations. It's a much better environment. So we've always been looking to figure out how to move the activities, and I get so confused on what the different courts call themselves, but the activities, and I'll just call it the courtroom with the jury box, because that's the one that's in City Hall. How do we move it into the Justice Center? How do we consolidate those activities into the Justice Center? And I'll give a little bit of a history, and someone could jump in if they want to. But Kingsport doesn't have to have courts. That's not a function of Kingsport. But that was a decision Kingsport made, and a good decision. Early 60s, would it have been, Jeff? Long time ago. And that decision, what it requires is the city of Kingsport to provide the courtroom space. And then the county is the ones that actually do the court activity themselves. But when we provide the courtroom space, then they will fill it. And since so much of the population's in Kingsport and Bristol, that's the arrangement that has occurred. And so that's why the city of Kingsport is the one that needs to build this new courtroom. So for security, modernization, and then support offices, meaning there's activities going on in City Hall that support activities there in the Justice Center. They're across the parking lot. There are law clerks in City Hall, and there's other courtrooms and activities that are occurring in the Justice Center. We want to consolidate, get everybody on one floor. And in 2009, the cost estimates to do that range between $5 million and $8 million. And if you move that forward, and the reason for that is you'd have to do a fairly sizable addition. And because we weren't able to move the city activities out of that second floor. And if you move those dollars forward, that would have been $6.5 to about $12 million. So you can see that if we were to tackle that today, that's a fairly substantial cost to move the courts into Justice Center and then do all the other city activities that are occurring at the same time. So that's just a data point. The other one is customer. This is one that, to me, we forget about until we kind of open our eyes and see how we present ourselves. But multiple times a day, If you go in and out of City Hall, man, who has ever gone in City Hall through the front door? Who has ever gone in City Hall through the back door? What business would?
There's side doors too.
Okay, who's gone through the side doors? If you were trying to attract customers, would you really bring them through this door into a corridor that you really don't know which other door to go into? The corridor always smells funny as well. I don't know why, but it does. We can replace carpet and it'll still smell funny. But you get to the end. I mean, every day I'm holding this door very awkwardly from the inside out for people to come in, and then they get to the end and they don't know which way to go either. And quite honestly, a large number of our people that are parking in this parking lot and traveling through here and then going to pay their water, sewer, or tax are senior citizens. And this is not even an ADA compliant entrance. Our ADA compliant entrance is on the Sharon's barbecue side. Kingsport, we reference everything to what it was. That's our ADA compliant entrance. So multiple times, that doesn't mean that they don't travel this way. So multiple times a day, we've got a lot of people coming in. And I didn't think about this, but our first interaction with the city of Kingsport was through that door to go sign up for water or sewer. What does that tell us about our government? That is not presenting ourselves well. So when developers from various areas, or even in here, come and they meet with our city manager, they come through that door. And that does not really bode well for who we are. Quite honestly, the city of Kingsport is much better than that. So the customers is something that kind of came later, but when we started putting it all together, we said, even if everything costs the same, we ought to do this just for the customer experience. Our citizens should be interacting with city government in a much better manner than we are now. But there's ADA issues. This is the improvement building. So if you come in and you have to buy a water tap, you go to City Hall. Then you have to walk 2 blocks over to buy your sewer tap at the improvement building. And then if you want to have it financed, you walk 2 more blocks over to City Hall to have it financed. That has been built over years and years and years of just doing functions, never thinking about it. So another high bar in this whole thing is to raise the customer experience. Now I'm going to get into kind of more of the, actually in a minute I will, the consolidation, but collaboration. So all the activities that pretty much interact with each other on a daily basis, whether it's HR, and when I say they interact with finance and Jeff, those people in City Hall on a daily basis, whether it's HR, our legal department, our procurement department, all are spread out. So our attorney, if he has to go get something sitting outside Jeff's office, it's a 2-mile drive back and forth. There's various reasons, and so what we miss in that is just seeing each other in the hallway. Our procurement manager being able to get an answer from the attorney by just walking down the hall and talking. We have to be much more intentional in how we're separated right now. So collaboration is a very large nail as well. Maybe not as big as customers or the courtrooms, but it's another benefit. And as we went through this, one thing we studied was what groups interact with each other the most and what groups interact with the public the most. And so the very large lines are where the public push in. And we were going to build a facility. At this time, we're thinking greenfield build. But we're going to build a facility that is directed toward the public, having those interactions very accessible to them, and then allowing these other groups to be in close proximity. And so these are all the different divisions and groups that we are pulling together in this effort. One that I want to talk to, it's kind of like these little side things came looping back in through the whole process. And one that came into the process, whoops, hit the wrong button. Anyway, I'll just point. One that came into the process that really has nothing to do with administration, but is really a high nail within the city of Kingsport is our library archives. And once we started talking to Regions, and once we started seeing the space that was afforded within Regions Bank or 415 Broad Street, we saw, well, we could remove library archives from the basement, the dungeon of the library, and we could make a much more prominent position for them. And we kind of got around that by looking at Regions, the way it was laid out. We saw a lot of space that could be for their displays, first and second floor, but we wanted a very large space because every year she continues to receive more and more information material, and she's running out of space. So that is one that we're excited that would be coming back into City Hall and be much more accessible to citizens as well. Okay, so this is really what brought me to this decision. This was the dollars and cents. So all of that stuff is great, and in fact, the courtrooms we should move on no matter what. But then when we see all that, is this something we should do? Is this going to create a cost burden for the citizens, or is it going to be at or below our existing liabilities out there? So what I did is I had, at the same time, we're under mandate for ADA improvements. We've got to make our buildings ADA compliant within a certain time frame. We also, so Going Trash Cane, Pat's group, Cane Rash West, I think they call themselves, did an ADA assessment of all our facilities. At the same time, we did a deferred maintenance assessment, looked at roofs, HVAC systems, all of those type things, and said in the next 10 years, what are we going to spend on these 4 facilities? Doing nothing. Doing nothing means don't consolidate. Just keep doing what you're doing. We came out that we're going to have a total capital expenditure of about $3 million over the next 10 years. So that will be plugged into our budget if we didn't go forward with Regions. That was in the budget to continue to move those facilities forward. Very important aspect of this is it does nothing to enhance the programs. That's just continue doing what we're doing. Courtrooms stay where they are, everything else stays where it is. And another thing we looked at just to make sure we weren't making a bad decision is the utility cost. Is having life within Regions cost about as much as it would in these other facilities. And really, it actually was a little less. Regions' annual utility cost was around 70, and ours for those 4 buildings was around 80. So that's kind of a wash. We just see that it's not a bad decision, is I guess the way to put it. So we estimate a savings of about $300,000 a year, taking that $3 million and just breaking it up into each year, plus about $10,000 a year in utility costs. And now, so those are the things that pushed us to say we need to do something. It makes sense to do something. At the same time, Regions was talking to us about selling their building at $30 a square foot. So the something is a small expansion to the Justice Center. This allows the courtroom, the clerks and all of their offices in. We will have the jury courtroom, make sure I don't, the jury courtroom would be adjacent to the other 2 with the judges' offices running the sides, just like they are in the rest of the Justice Center, and then Chancellery Clerk and Law Clerks on the 2nd floor. And on the 1st floor, we would have the tag out office and county tax office. Now, we're not responsible for those offices, but we'll make space for them and lease that space back to them. And that provides a small amount of space for some police expansion. One of the best things it does is we were going to come out into that covered but open foyer area and create a much more secured environment for our bailiffs. So this then allows everyone that comes into this system, whether they're in the jury courtrooms or the existing courtrooms, to be in a secured situation. So that takes care of Justice Center, and the reason that we're able to do this is we take IT, who is sitting right here right now, it's a city function, and we move them to Regions. That's kind of key in why we're able to do that without expanding the Justice Center. It's about a $2.3 million cost. And then on the Regions Bank, I mentioned we've removed all the city functions out of that 2nd floor of the Justice Center, allowed the courts to have that. We're moving that into Regions Bank, purchasing it with the furnishings at $30 a square foot. And then the parking lot, and it's amazing, most of the conversation after these presentations or after it hits the newspaper is they're taking the drive-through out. So right now the drive-through is not out. That's not in the plans, but that's been most of the conversation in chatter online. But what we show here is we could add some more parking if we took the drive-through out. And there's plenty of parking around City Hall, but this is really where we get excited with it. This is the face of Regions Bank, 3 double doors. So our customers who would park right along the front would be able to come straight in and interact with our customer service department. And to us, that is a light year step ahead. For the senior citizens and everybody that's doing business for us, it's very logical. We're able to do an ADA compliant counter for them over here. Our building department would be located adjacent on that first floor. So all the first floor would be customer interaction. Our Angie's office would be right here. So
Yeah, I need to talk to you about that.
yeah, so she would be very accessible to everyone in the city. And so the archive viewing station, but our customer interaction would be the first floor. The other, the second floor would be kind of our developer or those that we're trying to market to interaction. So your city manager suite is over here in Board of Mayor and Alderman suite side of the building. And development services would be over here. So if you're familiar with the planning department, that's who developers and everybody come to see. So our second and first floor are really reserved for those interactions between the city and the public. And then as you go on up, our board meeting room would be on the third floor, and you start having it. And an interesting thing is the yellow is program space. It just shows you how much larger this building is. The purple or the other color, gray, is non-program space. So there's a lot of other non-program space that is contained within this building. And you just move on through all of the floors, and everyone fits very well. And one of the things that Deneen West with Cane Ranch West saw when she walked through is how these offices with very little modifications could just move us right in. So what we've done is we've done a cost estimate, and I'll move on to it. So I did want to show the board that we would dedicate so many spaces for visitor and handicap parking, and then allow the staff into other areas, because one of the other concerns is there's enough parking. But if you've ever been to City Hall, there's no parking there now anyway. So I'm not quite sure what that concern is, but there's plenty of parking in adjacent lots. We're actually buying this lot from Regions. It'll become a public lot after we buy it. But
Who's on top floor?
oh, yeah, that's my office right there. 6th floor, southwest corner. But yeah, that's when you interact with the architects, they're able to do that for you. It's so funny to watch when we toured that with the board. If you know Jeff's office is like a closet now. So his car is small, his office, and then you go into this bank president's office. And you can see Jeff just crawling into his skin. He's like, well, sorry, Bill. Yeah. He's like, oh, this is killing me. But it is, the finishings in this building are so much higher than what we would ever do. And we don't have to do anything. It's there. It's just at such a high level. Anyway, I wish Ken Marsh was here to talk through the finances. Basically, it came down to a do-nothing cost. That means we just stay where we're at, but we do courts. I'm sorry, guys, but there's no way we can continue doing courts the way we're doing courts. We are going to have to move forward with the court system. And so deferred maintenance, $3 million. The court expansion, I'll just use a 6.5. That's moving them to the Justice Center, but not having anything from the city moved out. And then total capital is about 9.5, and we could move forward with that. If we were to build new, it was about a $15 million build. So to do the option that we proposed and the board approved was we purchased Regions at $35 a square foot, $2.82 million. That includes the parking lot beside Chef's, and renovate the Justice Center. And what I'm showing here is if those two offices from the county lease space from us, they'll be paying the debt service. So the real impact's 1.725, but we're going to get 2.3 million to do that work. And then hopefully we get some lease back. If they don't, we can't control what they do, but we'll make it available for them. And then the renovations at Regions, 3.4, and so much of that is basically carpet, the HVAC to make the offices habitable, and because they haven't really had a lot of people in 3 through 6 in a long time. And paint and bathroom, ADA compliant bathrooms and those type of things. So, and then the proceeds, we also at the same time had the 4 facilities appraised, and the 4 ones that we would be moving out of, the proceeds are about 2.3 million. So the total capital there is 5.645. So when you look at moving forward with 9 or moving forward with 5.645, it kind of drove the board to the decision of let's move forward. And then you throw in their customer interaction and the collaboration, and it really made it make sense to the board. So this is how we do it. We purchase the build the parking lot. We have to enter into a 2-year lease for floors 1 and 2 because Region has to build a new bank. So they would be leasing inside of our building for 2 years. And then the transaction for this is going to occur in the fall of this year. The board's already approved it. The money's available. We're just working with Regions right now to find a site. And once they find a site, everything will move forward. So it could come earlier. And the other thing we're going to do is designate an alderman that helps us dispose of these properties in July of this year. So our plan is to have an alderman that assists us in each one of these properties coming off city ownership back onto the tax rolls. Whoop, my little arrow doesn't really show up there. This is just another graphic that shows that we would fully occupy Regions sometime in the 2020, 2021 timeframe. And this gets a little more into detail. I'll just run through this because the board wanted to know how do we get this done, and we're showing them kind of a financing option that allows us to leverage what we're not going to invest back, those $300,000 a year back into those facilities to pay for what money we need to get this done. So we have just moved from maintenance to this construction. And let's see, what was that last one? Yeah, and then the first 2 floors will be about $1 million. So to leave you with doing nothing is the most expensive option. Still got to deal with the courts, still got to deal with ADA, life safety, still got to deal with deferred maintenance, and won't have the organizational efficiency. This option renews our customer experience. It puts back into the heart of the city, City Hall. As Jeff mentioned, that's where we're supposed to be. And it's an efficient, effective, customer-directed. I think our marketing came up with that plan. I guess I'll entertain questions, Sharon.
We're right at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
If everybody wants to ask questions, that's fine.
Any questions? Sorry it went long. Funky?
Yeah, there was originally a lot of discussion about available parking. You mentioned that, but has that been rectified, employee parking? There was a lot in the newspapers out there.
Yes, so the question, I'm doing this for David, I'm going to repeat your question. The question was originally when presented, there was a lot of concern about available parking. And what we've tried to show is we will direct the bulk of the employees to utilize this lot. That's why we're buying it. That's why the lot exists, is that building had to be built with a certain amount of parking. And so they've always called that the Regions lot or whoever was before. But around the bank itself, there is much more space than what we have around City Hall. Right now, the bulk of the employees park in the parking garage. So those employees that are now in the parking garage that are kind of eating up that space for the downtown area would either park around here or in that lot across from Chef's. We also got the lot behind the library, and each one of those, very small utilization. We count the spaces and know how much utilization. So we feel comfortable with the parking. Charlie?
Ryan, did I hear you at earlier meetings say you committed to park down there in the employee
Yes.
parking lot?
I have.
Excellent.
For the first week. No, I have. Anyone with any need whatsoever, there's plenty of parking adjacent to the building, and much better than what they have. Lynn?
Ryan, you talked about the need to interact with the public and taxpayer and whatever, and the fact that you're looking at how this could be a better solution. But what I see, the other verbiage you said was the ambiance at this bank facility has, which is normal, but may not be understood by the taxpayer saying, well, what are you doing with my tax dollar?
Yeah.
You've got, it's got to finish.
And that's true. It's, we can't change the fact, we were walking down a path looking for a certain amount of square footage, and this is about 12,000 more, but it came to us at $35 a square foot, where we would be building at about 150. So you can't change the fact that you're right. It's a very high finish. When we redo the downstairs, it's all, you'd almost spend money to make it not look as nice.
You almost prefer a look of how the money is being used. I don't mean that, I'm just saying.
Oh, I agree. The perception is,
Presentation you're making to the general public when they walk in their front door is, this is my tax dollar?
that's right, and I'm not quite sure if we can do a display to show what, and the other thing, if someone was to come in today and offer Regents to buy this building and keep it on the tax rolls and make it a viable building, we would support that 100%. The problem is that there's not the need for what they call Class A apartments. When you had the CBC and 280 build, it removed and consolidated for similar reasons a lot of the, not apartments, Class A offices. It removed, you just don't have this large a need for Class A offices. And so, but you're right, the perception will be difficult. Now, when you get up past floor 3, it's not the same, but 1 and 2 is definitely a bank trim. It's pretty nice. Now, it's 1980s vintage, so.
One of the goals or objectives of the city is around growth and development and attracting new people. We do an excellent job with the chamber, but when you come to our city hall, it's definitely a negative impression. I think this is going to be an important addition for those folks, and I think the people in the city will take pride in what we have there.
And one thing to get more to Lynn's and Tom's point, Regents has a large banner on top, a sign. It's our intention not to, the building is what it is what I'm saying. It's a large, very imposing building, and we're not going to have the city of Kingsport, across the side. We'll probably have a little monument sign. To try, I don't know how, but if you have any good architectural thoughts, how to minimize the, but yeah, we do not intend to say, look at how nice this is. But at the same time, we want to present it at the same level our citizens.
Well, it's a damn if you do that.
Yes, it is. Yes, sir.
Ryan, one of the things that, when it first came out, that concerned me was the capability of selling these facilities, thinking about how long the post office building is in the city. But if I look at those numbers right, even if you don't sell anything, it's a $1 million better deal. Is that
That's pretty much right. I could slip back to it, but.
The question beyond that is, which helps me in my thinking that it's a good deal. But do you have any active possible buyers for the facilities now?
Yes, each facility has had a lot of interest. The problem is the time frame versus, so we're kind of tempering the interest. Because even Regents wanted City Hall's location, but we're like, we gotta be in City Hall till we can get into yours. So you couldn't flip them. Center Street is attractive. The Midland Center has already had a lot of people asking because of the growth opportunities for adjacent businesses. When the time comes, we're able to do that. That's where that designated alderman will help direct. So what that number I showed you was just appraisals, appraised value. We're not really releasing what each one is until we get to the point where people come talking to us about each one. Improvement building, we've actually had realtors bring people through the building itself. It's one of its highest values, if you were to gut it, would be its proximity to Justice Center, lawyers' offices, or downtown living.
So what would that timeline be? Because, I don't think Kingsport wants just like an empty building sitting on Center Street for that long.
Well, Center Street, City Hall is, okay, let me talk back to time frame on Regents, sorry we're over. We're anticipating a closing on Regions in the fall. So that means we will have the opportunity to go in from floors 3 through 6. We anticipate clearing out Justice Center into Regions about this time next year. So we begin construction of Justice Center this time next year. We can't even get, City Hall activities will continue to occur in City Hall until more than 2 years from now. And then they will move over to Regions. By that time, there will be a plan for the city hall, whether it's been purchased, the building, whether it becomes, there's been conversation of allowing that to become a park with parking, because there's still gonna be need for parking next to the Justice Center. That's where the designated alderman will come in, but there won't be a empty city hall itself. What we consider city hall, there'll be some plan for it at that point, but that's like 2.5 years from now.
City Hall building itself sucks. Roof leaks, it's leaked ever since. You need to blow that thing in place.
I agree. I just can't say I'm not the designated alderman. It needs to come down.
Get up there and say that. The second thing is, what about, you buy this building cheap, all us poor country lawyers downtown trying to sell their building, can't get any money for them. Now, what do you do with that thing? What my taxes?
Which one are you asking? Which one we sound cheap?
You're-
Oh, if you think about it that way, I mean,
You're making fun of me, that's not fair.
no, I thought he heard something. No, that's if you think about it that way, if you're trying to sell your building, your office space, we just removed 74,000 square foot of competing office space off the market. That's a lot of competition for you trying to sell your building. We got it off the market. No one, does that make sense, Jack?
Yeah, but the cost it's an order for is so, would you be quiet? I'm trying to talk. The purchase price is very cheap, what I'm trying to say. Cheapens the other property around here. Even Manning goes there. It was, that wasn't nice.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
getting picked up from Jim.
I would say, I'm not really